So, I haven't actually watched Twister 1996. I know that it's kind of like the disaster movie whenever people talk about disaster films, but I haven't actually seen it. Now, I don't think that has any sort of effect when it comes to Twisters 2024, because I don't think the stories are actually that related, but just gonna preface this review by saying that. Generally, I'm not a huge Spielberg fan. I like some of his films. There are the big, like, nostalgia plays here and there that I do love, and I think that he's made a huge impact on film as a whole, but I'm not actually that big of, like, I'm not I guess a Spielberg truther in a way, but I do have a heart, and who doesn't love E.T.? So generally, I also don't like disaster movies. Honestly, I'm not really sure why I saw this film. If I'm gonna be totally honest, not really sure why I saw this film. But overall, I had a pretty good time. I do have, however, a bachelor's in meteorology, and am currently in school for my master's in meteorology as well. So I do have a scientific background going into this, and I was kind of curious to see, how they would demonstrate our modern understanding of meteorology and tornadoes in a modern blockbuster. So, moving on to mid-key ridiculous. Luckily, they never go full Sharknado. I'm very happy that they do not do that. I was a bit worried, because in the trailer, there is a little bit where a tornado runs over a power plant and it catches fire, so to speak. And there is a lot of elements in the trailer as well in the film about, like, completely stopping tornadoes. And there's these, like, little bulbs with, like, those seeds that have the little leaf on top that makes it spin around. They're like little bulbs like that like levitate itself inside the tornado and collect data and transmit it back via Bluetooth. I don't know. It's ridiculous, but not in the way where I ever got like a full disconnect. Like, there's no possible way any of this is a real legitimate story. It never broke my immersion, so to speak. There's a lot of, like, tornadoes of convenience. The film establishes that's taking place during a major tornado outbreak year. And, realistically, you can have a lot of setups where you have, more, fuel naturally for these larger storms to come through, and thus for more tornadoes, specifically down Tornado Alley, in which this film takes place in Oklahoma, smack dab in the middle of. So that part is kind of understandable, but it is, the ridiculousness comes from the fact that, like, me and date person are gonna go to movie. Oh no, tornado happened! Yeah, it's the dramatic timing of the tornadoes is pretty fun throughout the film. My god, there's a lot of analogies with tornadoes throughout the film. You gotta believe me, there's some crazy moments where, like, my life is kind of like a tornado. It's very spinny and full of wind and hot air. And you know what? Based King. That's pretty funny. I do have to acknowledge, though, there's some mild internet cringe throughout. Basically, Glenn Powell and his whole group are tornado influencers. Honestly, it could have been a lot worse, except for the one moment where Glenn Powell, specifically references his chat. Luckily, they don't really go too deep into that stuff. It's not a major part of the film, but it is there, and it is cringe. Yeah, science, bitch! So, the movie genuinely demonstrates some authentic origins of passion for sciences. In my schooling, I know a lot of different people their origin for why they're interested in this specific scientific field is directly aligned with different characters in the movie. And I genuinely like seeing that. Is it a bit cliched? Sure, but life doesn't always have to be original all the time, and there are real people out there like that. It does pay lip service to real meteorological foundations, such as NOAA, NWS. You go into, the camera follows a tour of the like NWS office in New York City, and that's really fun. I enjoyed that. That's a nice little nod. It kind of covers some real meteorological concepts in a way that the audience can understand. Most of it is just like, these are real terms, but it's passed through like gobbledygook. And you can tell when the directors are like, okay, we don't actually need a meteorologist to write this movie, right? We can self-insert as the person who's outside of the meteorology nerd, and they're like kind of laughing at them a little bit, and a nudge nudge, oh, I love you, but you're a dork. And then there's a MacGuffin of like the weather manipulation, which I'd say like pseudo represents real life research. There's elements such as cloud seeding, which is obviously very real, and there are bits of that represent itself in the film. Of course, the idea of driving yourself underneath a tornado in the direct path and then releasing chemicals into the air to stop it is pretty far-fetched. But again, it kind of fits into that, again, mid-key ridiculous sort of element that the film has. It near perfectly characterizes the modern level of understanding of tornadoes and incorporates that into the plot and motivation. It's actually like kind of refreshing to see. The movie talks about how there's elements of a storm that we understand very well the mechanics and the physics of, but there's also elements specifically of tornadoes where they're at such a small scale that we don't truly understand all the different elements of how they form and why they exist. We have some information such as like horizontal convective rolls and the turning of which that creates that same circulation within a larger storm, but there is a lot unknown. And it's really kind of refreshing to see them talk about like the 3D modeling element. There's a major part where they have this like radar scanner, which is very like futuristic. They talk about how I can see a bug 20 miles away, but they use that and they try to get a perfect like 3D scan of the storm. And that's actually kind of cool because, you know, actually having a fully 3D modeled actual moving tornado could help teach us a lot about how tornadoes actually function. The only goofy part is that I need to set up 3 radars or else it won't work at all. No, if you have 2 at slightly different angles, you can still infer a lot from that data. That's actually still really helpful. Now, yikes, science bitch. So, natural disaster porn. There's a lot of it in this movie. There's some truly horrifying displays of genetic destruction, mostly within the realm of reason, but enough to panic individuals familiar with the phenomenon. Of course, it's used for development of the plot. There's some scenes where just truly horrible random chance has befallen the heroes, and they're just getting slapped upon in whatever place they're trying to hold down. But for anybody vaguely familiar with the destruction caused by these real natural disasters is going to have a tough time watching a lot of the imagery in this film. Far more horror comes honestly from the poor civil engineering than the anomalous destruction, which I can't actually tell if it's maybe like a thing I like about the film or if it's a thing I don't like about the film. It's truly real, which is that some cities and towns are very poorly developed in order to withstand the natural disasters expected from where it's located. So it's kind of interesting, kind of terrifying to see that demonstrated in the film. It's definitely one of those movies where you'll find yourself face-palming at stupid decisions and not being surprised when you see the consequences. Lots of characters doing stupid things like, I don't think tornadoes are real. You're lying to me, Mr. Tornado Man. I'm gonna go walk out of this door right now, and there's not gonna be a tornado there. Very, very horror film. There's no monster in the wood. There's no guy named Jason with a horror mask sort of thing. No tornado with a Jason mask. It's very goofy. There is a nice touch to mention the less than moral financial profiteering off of natural disasters. Some minor touches discussing like real estate and how others can make money off of the tragedy of American common folk. And specifically talking about how the monopolization of real estate, even in rural America. It's a very small portion of the film, but I'm very glad it was brought up. And I very much appreciate the dilemma for scientists, the question to use your knowledge to help others versus profit from the wealthy. It's extremely real, and in touch with modern times. A movie out of time. The 30-year-old franchise hasn't really aged a day. The film feels extremely reminiscent of Spielberg's work and the era of mid-90s adventure films, down to the pacing, progression of the plot, stationary character roles, and relationship development. For a film that takes place in the modern day, it feels oddly nostalgic for an older Hollywood formula. I'm talking about like the progression of the events, the way that the characters feel and act, the roles that the characters have in the film. It honestly feels very much like an Indiana Jones film or something of that nature, where it's an older age and we're not trying to subvert your expectations. It's an utter lack of subversion, and it's kind of refreshing, but also kind of stale when you honestly think about it. Couple flat Stanleys. As mentioned previously, the characters are unfortunately extremely tired out tropes, served up just as you expect. No real standouts in terms of character. Some engaging performances, but nothing really deep going on beneath the surface. Nothing that's actually gonna surprise you as to watch the film. I just found myself, whenever a character would do something that wasn't necessarily extremely developed earlier in the film, I would just be like, oh, that's nice. I've seen it before, though. I guess there is subversion in that sort of way that you get more information as the film goes on about certain characters, but it's not going to surprise you at all. Your grandmother, as long as you turn the volume down and you put on subtitles, she's not going to have a heart attack out of shock. Many scenes feel like they drag as you immediately understand what's going to happen, and you're just waiting for it to progress from these very antique arcs. A lot of copy-paste scenes, things you've seen before, going back, visiting the home, having the awkward conversation with the old friend. Once you've seen these scenes enough times, at no point are they genuinely going to bring you joy. Onto final thoughts. So, Twisted 2024, is it worth your time? Yes, but unfortunately, it's very formulaic. If you're tired of the modern blockbuster formula, you may find yourself relieved to relive the decades-old formula of years past. Like myself, I did find myself having a good time throughout the film, but when you think about it, it's nothing really worth of grand praise. It's kind of wild to see Spielberg's work go from revolutionary to nostalgic, even for his modern projects. I for sure am a Glen Powell fan now. I think this is my first really big project with him. I didn't watch that romance movie that blew up earlier this year. And I enjoyed the rest of the cast for the most part, especially the guy from Hamilton. And I hadn't seen the lead actress in much before this, but I do think she genuinely did a good job. And I do give Twisters 2024 a 3.5 out of 10. 3.5 beans. Yay. Good for Twisters 2024. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a good time. And let me know what you thought of Twisters 2024 in the comments down below. Have a great day.